Good afternoon and welcome to Slow Art Friday. My name is Christy McMillan. I'm the museum's Director of Learning and Engagement, and I am joined by our touring docent, Hank Bovee, who will be leading today's discussion. Hey, Hank. Each Friday at 12 p.m. while the museum is closed, docents lead virtual interactive conversations about a few artworks in our collection or special exhibitions. The goal is simple: slow down, discover the joy of looking at art, and talk about the experience with others. For today's program, Hank will lead us in an interactive conversation about 3 artworks in our collection. We'll spend about 15 minutes or so with each artwork. Hank will allow us time to look at each work on our own, slowly, before leading a conversation about each one with questions. As participants, we encourage you to engage in dialogue with Hank, myself, and each other throughout the hour. Just a few notes before we get started. You noticed as you were getting logged in that your microphones and video were muted by default. There will come a time in the not too distant future where I will make it so that everyone can unmute their microphones. Some tips for the best experience: choose a quiet room and close the door. Please do silence alerts from any nearby devices like phones, computers, tablets, etc. If you do choose to turn on your video, try not to sit in front of a window, lamp, or other strong light source, as it makes it hard to see you. Use headphones and microphone for best sound quality. Use a desktop, laptop, or tablet to see slides and meeting tools on a larger screen. So that we know who we're talking to, make sure that your screen name includes your first name and last initial, or first name and last name. Throughout the program, to ask questions or make comments, the easiest way to do so will be to unmute your microphone when Hank or I ask for questions or comments. You can also type any questions or comments that you have in the chat box. A third way is to raise your hand in the participant sidebar, and either Hank or I will call on you when there's a pause in the conversation and ask you to unmute your microphone. We do encourage you to just jump in, though, when you have questions or comments. Finally, we are recording today's program, so if you prefer not to be recorded, please make sure that your video and audio remain muted and use the chat box to submit any questions or comments that you have. At this point, I'm going to make it so that folks can unmute themselves at will. Please do leave your microphone muted if you're not actively asking a question or making a comment. Any questions before we get started? Hank, tell us what we're going to be talking about today.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Hank Bovee, touring docent, and welcome to our Slow Art Friday. I see several familiar names and faces, so welcome back. A few new folks. I'm so glad you joined us today. So today we're going to look at 3 works that are part of, hang on one second.
Spike doesn't like to be ignored. He wants to go out when he wants to go out. This is the pleasure of being at home with our coworkers, right? While we're waiting, I did just want to say thank you to Steve and Kathy. Steve and Kathy have volunteered to try and find music that goes with each of our virtual programs in order to set the mood. So I'll put in the chat box the 2 selections that we played while we were in the waiting room today. Take it away, Hank.
There is the music today, so very good. So we're looking at 3 pieces from the Many Become One collection, which the Many Become One, kind of relates to the slogan of the United States, E Pluribus Unum, where we unite disparate parts into a whole. I chose these 3 works for a couple of reasons. One is these are the 3 works that greet you as you come into the museum. The one work is right there in the courtyard. The second work is right there at the door. And then, of course, Big Black America, the big map of the United States. You can't miss it once you're inside the museum. When I was choosing these works a few weeks ago, it was kind of the height of the Black Lives Matter protests, along with all the other things going on in the world right now. I thought these would be appropriate. As you know, the piece that sits out front actually was graffitied during the protest. It was cleaned up by the staff. And the other two also, for me, have some meaning around what the country's going through. So with that said, as Chrissy mentioned, we'll put up a work. I'll give you a few moments to look at it, and then we'll talk about it. So Chrissy, if you could put up our first work, please. All right, folks. And feel free just to jump in there with your comments. But so the question I'm going to ask you first is, what do you see? What's going on in this work?
Well, the most striking thing is the shape of the country. And I love the simplicity of black and white because you really get to see all the nooks and crannies that this country makes.
So, right, it's the shape of the United States, and pretty much it's a map of the United States. What else do you see?
I really like the texture, the way the raised pieces of, looks like the wood is done there, and just the the way it has the little pieces, the large pieces, and yet you're able to get that shape of one unified country.
Oh, very good. So just to make sure that's right. So you see the different pieces of wood, large pieces, small pieces. So even though there's many different shapes and styles of wood on there, they form a unified picture of the United States.
Steve?
Yes, I really love this piece myself. And it's, I guess one thing that I appreciate about this is it truly exemplifies unity. I mean, unity of the country, but unity of all these really different pieces of salvage materials and woods, all sorts of things he's put together. They all fit together just incredibly well. And so I think it's a very dramatic piece, one thing I'm proud to have in the lobby of our new museum. But I just think it exemplifies, you know, what we're talking about today.
Exactly why I chose it. So very good, because yeah, it is very representative of kind of what's going on. You know, so anybody else?
You know, as I looked closer up, what I saw were different types of tools which could represent different forms of life experiences or careers involved. I see what looks like a cup. I see what looks like books. I see what looks like a measuring tool. I forgot what it's referred to. I see a paintbrush. I see so many different types of tools, but using those tools as representation of, it took all different aspects of skills and gifts to be able to build what is a unified America.
Yes, as you mentioned, there's all these different tools, as previous commenters mentioned, different sizes. However, you know, if we go back to the theme of many become one, all those different size tools, different types of wood, different sizes are unified in this picture of our country.
Although you can make out the individual states, especially along the coastline, you can see that it's all brought together. And I agree, there looks like little different pieces, perhaps even to designate what maybe the individual states may be known for in some fashion.
Could be. So just to make sure I understood that, so you're noting that the different shapes or tools could be related to what that state is known for or that area is known for.
Yes.
Very good. Any comments on the color? You know, obviously the artist shows this monochrome black. So what do you think about that?
I think it helps.
Oh, excuse me, Barbara, go ahead.
I think he's trying to show that there is consistency, that there is something cohesive about America, even though it has all these little integral parts. There is some unifying concept. I think the color gives it a unification of feeling.
I agree, and it also, I think, you know, you think of the country and colors that are associated with it. You know, if you look at typically a map, it's got blues and greens and browns and, you know, those natural colors. The country America, maybe you think of red, white, and blue. And I think it's really a powerful statement that it's blanketed in black. And so I think that it's, you know, it's right in tune with the Black Lives, you know, Matter movement and, you know, the racial issues that have been at the forefront.
So very good. Yes, I heard that the black color, the monochrome kind of unifies the image rather than if it was, you know, California's red, New York was blue or whatever. Anybody else?
I agree with Kathy that the monochrome and the black is very powerful, and there's various shades of black there, almost to a gray in some aspects. Plus, to me, it says we're all different, but we're all the same.
Yes. And so, and I keep hearing sort of a recurring theme here. You know, we talked about different size tools, but they're unified in this artwork, that there's various shades of black, from the darker black to more gray. There again, that shows a unified country, you know, with different shades in there. So I think we're kind of seeing a theme there, don't you all?
Mm-hmm.
So what else do you see? Barbara. Are you raising your hand, Barbara?
That unmute. Okay, I was muted. Even though it's unity, I think showing all the pieces shows that there is also some struggle. There is also, I mean, reflecting Black Lives Matter, I think that it's made up of little bits and pieces. Maybe the tools is the work ethic. Maybe all the, you know, there's parts of furniture, there's trees, there's just so many different segments. So while it's still unified, there is still some kind of diversity. And I think the different pieces to the artist must have represented different maybe struggles or different walks of life, something different within the country. Otherwise, it could be just plain flat black. I think the fact that there's all of that texture and that it's mostly natural materials or work materials, I think that says something as well.
Well, anybody, someone else? I thought I heard some comment there. Barbara, I would have to say that's a good point in that, you know, we saw tools that are used to build the country, struggle, you know, differences, different people, different situations that are unified in the country. And just to give you, you may already know this, but the title of this picture is My Big Black America. So with that in mind, does anybody have any thoughts on that?
You know, as I look at the piece more seeing individual aspects of it, but seeing how all those individual aspects come together. That I also see the intricacies of what was used to put it together, that it takes time. I can't imagine how long it took for him, the artist, to be able to put this together. But I think maybe that is some representation of the amount of time that it will take, or we may see it take for that unity to truly be represented in everybody's hearts. And so that's what I'm picking up from it. And going along with the title, My Big Black America, seems to, for me, represent some of those intricacies that are there.
Yes, definitely. And Barbara has says in the comments, our first, let's see, let me make sure. Kathy says it's hard to see all the various elements. We'd love to hear some of the specific elements identified. Barbara says it's more dramatic in person, which indeed it really is, because the scale of it. And for those of you that have not seen it, it is 192 inches by 120 inches. So it's a massive piece. It is stained, spray paint, latex, salvage wood. Let's see, Kathy says maybe others have better monitors. No, I wish, this is definitely a piece that looks better in person than on the slide, because that scale on the museum wall is just so impressive. As far as some of the components, so I'm not the only one with a noisy house. It's a scarred wood foundation. It's a mix of elements from turned furniture, tree limbs, and fresh unblemished lumber. So, to give you a bit more on this piece of the artist, it is by Wesley Clark. Wesley Clark got his Bachelor of Fine Arts in painting at Syracuse University, and then his Master of Fine Arts in studio at George Washington University. This is the mix of old and new wood. Refers to the generations of African Americans whose labor built the infrastructure and economy of the United States. And I heard that come up in some comments in that direction. He also used wood, because wood, just like humans, will show scars, will show aging, just like human flesh does. So that's very much a tribute to the African Americans who basically built the infrastructure of the United States.
Hank, it occurred to me while we were talking that I have a 6.5-minute video showing Wesley Clark putting My Big Black America, making My Big Black America, and have a little commentary. Do you have time to put that in there?
Why not? Let's do that. I think we can fit 6 minutes in.
Something that Marie said reminded me, because she said, I don't know how long it took for Wesley Clark to put this together. And I thought, wait a minute, I've got footage of that. So thanks for making that comment, Marie. Let me pull that up for everybody. Give me just 1 second.
Sure. And while Chrissy's doing that, you can see here the scale of it with Wesley Clark standing in front of it.
Wait a minute. Okay, can everybody see?
So we're working on the My Big Black America project, and this is the second coming of My Big Black America.
Just 1 second.
The first one I did in grad school. Unfortunately, I had to dismantle it because the construction glue, I was told, was great.
Not sure.
And so multiple pieces, when it was showing glass, I was getting calls saying, these fell off.
So you guys can hear it, but you can't see it, right?
Right.
I can't hear it either.
you see it now?
But I always wanted to redo it. And even when I first did. So we're working on the My Big Black America project, and this is the second coming of My Big Black America. The first one I did in grad school. Unfortunately, I had to dismantle it because the construction glue I was told was great did not hold, and so multiple pieces. When it was showing last, I was getting calls saying, a piece fell off, here and there. So I had to keep making, slight corrections. Anyway, point being, I had to get rid of it because I couldn't have it out there in someone's home or what have you falling apart. So I always wanted to redo it. And even when I first did it and first had it on the wall, I wanted to make it bigger. The first one was 12 feet by 8 feet, but on the wall, it looked too small to be My Big Black America. So, I mean, now granted, My Big Black America can never be too big. And so even this one, I want to be on the side of a building. But, so the new one is 16 feet by 10 feet, 16 wide, 10 feet tall. And it'll be showing at Corridor Gallery in Brooklyn. And I was talking with the curator, Mikhail Solomon, and which is how she invited me to do the show, and we got to talking about the piece, and I told her how, it was dismantled, etc. So she asked if I could do it again. I told her I said I always wanted to do it, so that was the impetus for starting this once again. So, however, once again, the time frame is short to 2 weeks. I had less than 2 weeks to develop it, as far as the hanging mechanism, and do the whole piece essentially. And which was pretty much similar to how the first one was made. I feel like this is one of those projects where it was never going to happen unless one, someone asked me to do it for a show, which is what I wanted to do, and B, if it was going to be on a tight time frame, because it's kind of like you just dive in and you have to just go. As I've been building this one, I've been trying to think what is the relevance of this piece. And originally, the first My Big Black America was kind of like my Obama piece. When everyone was doing portraits of him, I knew I wasn't going to do a portrait. That wasn't it. It wasn't enough. And so I was struggling trying to figure out a way that I was going to represent and do something that dealt with his presidency. And so it took me 2 years and trying out different ideas and sketches and things. And I was listening to Carrie Mae Weems, I think she was on Art 21, I think. And she mentioned how, for the first time with President Barack Obama's election, or however that's supposed to be said, it was for the first time blacks could say our country or my country. And so as soon as she said that, it clicked. And because I hadn't really gotten a full grasp of even what I thought it meant for me, but when she said that, it was that's what it is. And it made just so much sense. But so I dove in and did the first one. And so now, and that was in 2010, so 2 years into his presidency. And now we're in 2015, with basically 1 year left in his presidency, and thinking, what is the significance of this, of redoing it now? And somebody told me recently, and this was kind of what I think has been driving me, is the idea that for the first time, there are, 70-year-old kids walking around that have never experienced anything but a black president. And that alone was I had not considered it. My child was born under a black president, and she's 2 years old. When I think about that, for some reason, that just is amazing to me. and great. And I mean, what is normal for these kids in every day, you know, is our dream, is our thought that something that could never happen. But for them, it's like, you know, it's just what it is. This is the only thing they've known. And so that to me was like a major relevance, I guess, for this piece. And on this one is also built differently. The first one was strictly stained wood, where this one is a mix of stain, it's a mix of spray paint, different types of, you know, gloss and different finishes, also some latex paint in there, just to get some different textures of Black America, you know. Kind of realizing the first one was a little bit more, I guess, calm and simpler. This one is kind of a little bit more busier, which is kind of, I think, speaks to a little bit more of the complexion and the complexity of Blacks in America. It kind of just gives you a wider feel and thought, I think, to go with it. The other side I was thinking about was, or I was asked about, was how did it feel to dismantle the first one? And at the time I remember wondering, like, it felt like I was somehow making a statement about Black America by having to dismantle this piece. And I didn't really know what it was, and I kind of didn't want to wrap my head around it just because it seemed negative, and I didn't really want to deal with that idea. But I mean, you know, obviously we could read into it so many different ways, but I guess I'd rather focus on the positive of the rebuilding. I am Wesley Clark. This is my Big Black America.
All right, thanks so much, Chrissy. Just to go through some of the comments before we move on. A lot of thanks to Christy. You know, it took him 2 weeks to build, which for some is a surprise. Some folks wondered if he had to pull it in out of the rain or he just watched the weather forecast. You know, also that one comment was that his child was born when Obama was president. And I did see that when I was reading up on him, you know, and basically, to kind of paraphrase what I read, even though, you know, Obama was a huge step for Black America, the struggle was still there. You know, that's certainly by no means, even that was a major step, it really didn't change that much as far as the struggle goes. And someone else mentioned a podcast where talking about slavery basically being the economic engine that built America. And that's also part of what this piece is about. So with that said, any other comments?
I did just want to say that my Big Black America hit a lot of high notes for, you know, adding to our collection. It was the first artwork installed in the new museum. Wesley and his assistant came and installed it where you can see it today at the end of May 2019. So that was a big, big moment for the museum. It was also a big, big moment for Wes because it was his first artwork that was acquired by an art museum.
I'll add one more thing, and that is, if you go to the Astro Art Museum blog on the web, on their website, you will see a very good article by Christy about this piece and this artist. Any last comments before we move on? All right, Christy, if you could put our next selection up there. And if you all take a look at this for a few moments, and then we will talk about it. All right, what do you see here, folks?
I'm drawn to the simplistic and small amount of color that is there. And how, for me, as small a portion as it is, how powerful it is. Saying that small piece that small portion of color is still very visible within the juxtaposition of the huge piece that is there itself.
So what I heard is, despite the simplicity of this piece, it's a very powerful piece. And that little bit of color that you see is so subtle, but really makes the piece powerful.
It's interesting that Marie and I seem to think alike, that was one of the first things that struck me as well in looking at this piece, where you see the crystal and just that little bit of blue-green, that color really stands out and draws me into it.
Yeah, the blue-green, exactly. Because if you picked a different color, I think we've had this conversation before in other works, it'd be a whole different piece, wouldn't it?
Just in the interest of full disclosure, that's a reflection. It's actually clear crystal that you're looking at. So I went and took some photographs so that Hank could have some details. I know that the works that we're looking at today are rather large, and I wanted you all to be able to see details when Hank was ready for them. And I had a really hard time taking any angle of that side of the artwork that did not have some sort of reflection of color in it.
Thanks, Christy. Go ahead, Kathy. Oh, you.
Yeah, well, maybe the artist liked the fact that it would be reflecting like that. And what struck me originally was the contrast between the base being so solid and heavy and strong, and the crystal, which is strong, but it's got what looks like almost cracks, crevices on one side in particular in this view. So there's a delicacy, there's a contrast.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe the materials and the size? I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at, especially now that, there's reflections. It does remind me a little bit of the Vance Monument, though, so.
It is cast lead crystal and steel. So that base is steel. The top part is cast lead crystal. And Chrissy, if you could flip to the title slide. I didn't write down the size because I knew it would be on the title slide. So it's 72 inches tall by 19 by 11.
I think the title is interesting, Ice Meadow. And actually, I don't know how many other participants, Alex Bernstein, he did give one of the presentations about a month ago, I believe, on one of the Art Wednesdays, I believe, and he was very interesting. But the title, I don't know if it matches to me, the piece.
Mm-hmm. Here you go, Hank. This is what I was able to take for you yesterday to give people a feeling of, if you were closer up in the texture. So Marie, this is what I was talking about here, that the smooth side of it, no matter where I stood, I was getting, whatever was behind it is sort of magnified because it's polished. But you can see there's sort of two distinct sides, the smooth side and then the rough side. Does that help? I think that Barbara, you had asked if you could see something a little bit closer, and Suzanne, admittedly, this photograph is sort of a representation of the artwork itself, but maybe isn't, three-dimensional artworks are meant to be experienced in person, right? So this is, I think, probably the best that we can do, but hopefully those details helped.
Well, the title and the close-ups did help a lot. Thank you.
So looking at the close-ups, if you could flip back to those, Christy, anybody have any comments about, does that change what you're looking at?
Yeah, the texture looks like a lot like, mountains that I've climbed out west in the United States. That's initially what, I felt like I was looking at. I didn't really relate it to ice. I really related it to more of a granite, mountain range, and high cliffs, and it really, just the random fissures and decay of by weather over time. I relate more towards mountains.
So what I heard was that the close-up does give you more of the impression as ice, whereas the full photo, since it was hard to see, looked more like granite to you, but now you see the ice. So it kind of changes, perhaps, the meaning for you. Anybody else?
Well, the name in the title is intriguing because I don't see the meadow, but when I think of that word, I think of large, open, peaceful space. So it's very interesting that word is in this sculpture, ice meadow, and I'm not sure that I can find an explanation for it.
Well,
perhaps with way that ice is, that seeing in the picture here where it shows the reflection of a different color than what was in the original picture, but also that we see what we want to see in it. And so maybe the meadow part of the title was to then help us project a more warmth in what we may see as for me, a cold structure, the steel, the strength of the ice part in this, but the meadow is supposed to help us maybe transform into that light, airy feeling that we associate with the word meadow.
So some good points that it's not to necessarily lead you, but give you that impression that you can, whatever you want to see in this, to open your mind to see different things, just like the reflection of color, like you said, you see what you want to see. So anybody else? So I will tell you that there really is such a thing as ice meadow or ice meadow. Let me get to my notes. So ice meadow is like the rivers along the Great Lakes. As they freeze and chunks of ice form, they get washed to the shore and they sit on the shore until they thaw in the spring. And it's partly, it keeps trees from going right up to the riverbank and lets smaller shrubs grow, but also it can be indicative of the environmental health of the river. So this particular artist is actually a local artist, Alex Bernstein. He went to UNCA and got a degree in psychology and actually worked in children's hospitals, decided to change his focus and ended up getting an MFA from Rochester Institute of Technology. He did spend some time teaching at the Cleveland Institute of Art. And so in Cleveland, the Cuyahoga River runs right through downtown Cleveland and empties into Lake Erie. You all may remember back in, I think, the late 60s, early 70s, when the Cuyahoga River caught fire. It was kind of, the news really went wild with that story. It was the beginning of the environmental movement. And it just kind of showed us how careless we had been and polluting our rivers, polluting our waterways, to where a river caught fire. So that harks back to my comment about the ice meadows can be indicative of the health of the river. So now the ice meadows have returned because Cleveland did a good job of cleaning up the river, cleaning up the lake. And I actually lived in Cleveland for 6 years before I retired. And it was one of my favorite places to live, believe it or not. Partly because it's a great city, but they've also done a really nice job of kind of rising from the ashes. You know, it was a Rust Belt city, just like Buffalo, Toledo, Detroit, all those Rust Belt cities along the Great Lakes. Cleveland's one of the success stories. You know, they've rebuilt their economy, they've rebuilt their city, they've cleaned things up. The river is now clean. So I thought it was kind of appropriate to include this piece in today's mix of pieces, because it does kind of symbolize sort of a renewal and rebirth and hope for the future kind of feeling now that you know the story. Any comments?
That information is very interesting. Made it mean a lot more to me. And I'm glad you shared that.
Thank you. Me too, because you know I noticed the piece because you walk in the museum, it's right there at the door. And it's a nice piece, but I never thought that much about it until I actually started reading up on it. And that's when I really thought, wow, what a good piece. And we touched on that, you know, in our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Let's then go ahead, Christy, if you don't mind. We'll move to our last piece. And this is another one that's kind of hard to see, but Christy, I think, has some different views that she can show us as we start our talk. So take a few moments, look at it, and then we'll talk about it. All right, what do y'all think? What do you see here?
Obviously, sort of planetary shaped, obviously. I'm sort of interested to know, like, how the artist actually, you know, it's very rough, you know, and how they produced the piece. I can't imagine, like, how they started with a piece maybe that was round and maybe cut into it, or if it was actually started from the bottom with individual pieces and built up to a perfect sphere. I can imagine different ways that, you know, they could create this, you know, this piece.
I think
So, go ahead.
I would say the color in the blue, it makes it very dramatic, and the calming of the blue, and you think of the sky and you think of the ocean, and I just think of the earth altogether, as opposed to if it was like a fiery red or orange or even earth tones. I think the blue really makes the piece.
Yes, talk about both those comments. So the first comment was, you know, very planetary looking, and just, you know, the materials on that one are chiseled, sanded, bonded plate glass. So that's the material. And then, as you said, well, just the blue color gives it a whole more peaceful appearance than if it were red or orange or some hot color. And also, I think it might tie back to the planetary look. You know, if you think about the blue planet, which one is that? So.
Barbara in the chat box said that this artwork feels mythological. Why do you say that, Barbara?
I don't know, somehow with it on the rock, I feel like it has a story about some god coming and bringing, I don't know, there's just something so dynamic. I don't know whether the rock is part of the sculpture and intended, but as beautiful as the sphere is, and I do love it, having it placed on that rock gives it some kind of, I don't know, something surreal or unworld, you know, mythological, something dynamic, that it represents something really dynamic. To me anyway. I just love it. I think it's beautiful, and I was sad when I heard it's on loan, and I'm hoping it never goes away because I think it's just gorgeous.
It is a nice piece, and I see what you're saying about the mythological aspect, almost like Zeus or whoever plucked up this blue orb or planet and just dropped it on this rock.
Yeah. Maybe I just like to make up stories.
That's a good one.
Also, it's interesting to see the smaller rock that's very important for balancing the whole unit.
Okay. Good thought there, and just expand on that. What do you think about how it's positioned on the rock?
Well, maybe it's saying don't underestimate small and subtle.
Don't underestimate small, yes.
I'm even thinking it's such a balancing act, right? Being human and what we think we accomplish and sitting on top of this like construct, really.
Could you say that again?
It seems to me that the globe on top is really fragile, and it's sort of balancing, and since it's man-made, it looks to me like a balancing act that we humans have, that we try to sit on top of the world, and really we're so fragile. That rock is so much more solid. Feels like I could take that lower rock and throw it through that globe easily. So maybe just a reminder of how fragile this earth is, and how, you know, we feel that everything is so solid when maybe that's an illusion.
And perhaps what a delicate balance this world is as well.
Yep. So perhaps, even though it's, a solid rock, a piece of glass, but the balance is still fragile, it sounds like I'm hearing. So I love this piece. The color is gorgeous, from Barbara. And from Mike, this is Earth Ocean Orb. Love it. Can you tell me more about the Earth Ocean Orb? What that means?
Micah Jean, if you would like to unmute your microphone. Yeah, there you go.
Hi.
Hi.
That's just how I just see it, as an orb, like a flowing, undulating earth ocean. It's just stunningly beautiful. And it's undulating to me. The texture evokes a lot of movement.
So you see a lot of movement in there, even though it's a stationary object. It gives that illusion of movement.
Yeah, I think the contrast with the base makes it even more fluid.
Hank, I have, you had remarked, Micah Jean, about the texture. There you go. So this is, and also Edward had remarked about the texture. This is what it looks like close up.
Yeah, wow.
So what do y'all think about that texture?
I just want to dive into it.
Yeah, it has a softness to it that you want to be a part of it, whereas the rock has a roughness to it that your eyes more gravitate towards the towards what's on top as opposed to what's at the bottom.
That texture draws your eye up to the orb. Anybody else?
If I remember correctly, it's not a solid, like you can, there's actually like slots that actually go through, correct?
So you're asking if the orb is solid?
Right, right. If I remember correctly, it's not actually a solid orb. It actually has not holes, but yeah, slots that go through, correct? To the inside?
It's hollow, yes. And you can see, Edward, I'm trying to point them out on the screen. I'm not sure if you're able to see my cursor, but there are places where you can sort of see through to the inside.
Right, right.
So there's some inner workings going on there.
Yeah, when I first saw this piece, I just wanted to touch it. I wanted to do what we're not supposed to do with artwork. The rock, the boulder, the orb, for sure. I found that texture to be so enticing.
You're not the only one, Kathy. I watch it all day.
I can see movement. It almost looks like ocean, like a body of water moving along.
So the blue orb, is that what you're saying? Kind of reminds you of a body of water moving?
Well, with the texture as well, with the close-up, I could almost see a school of fish swimming along through it.
Yep, yep.
Something that sort of grabs me is that, it's what appears to be glass. I know it's not glass, but and you have this solid rock, and the sphere is precariously positioned directly on this large rock. And obviously you think about the possible outcomes for two such objects in the world, that sphere rolling off, the large rock crushing the glass sphere, but no, they sit there, together in unison, without colliding.
So right, that the glass and rock are kind of opposites, aren't they? So I see what you're saying. So let me ask you all this question. So our theme today was many become one. How does this piece relate to that theme for you all?
Well, I think the sphere balancing on the rock, and also the smaller rock to the bottom left, shows how much we rely on each other to coexist. So that shows me in this particular piece is how much the sphere relies on the rock to be able to maintain that balance and not, say, roll away itself.
So basically, we kind of exist in a delicate balance where we have to rely on each other to sort of keep that balance. Very good. Who else? Anybody else have any thoughts? Go ahead.
Well, I think not only what Marie said about relying upon each other and everything's interrelated and interconnected, but it just, I guess as an environmentalist, it also just strikes me as the planet and how we are all part of that foundation. And there's a feeling for me of uplift, of lifting up this watery planet. and we're all part of that. So yeah,
So yeah,
lifted up by this solid foundation.
so yeah, it's very good that the fact that we're kind of all part of that rock that supports the planet. So who else has a thought on that?
Well, the fact that they're natural elements, I believe, is the orb, did we say it's glass?
It is plate glass.
Okay. Is that natural? Right.
Plate glass, I would think, go through some kind of manufacturing process, but
Are you asking about the rock, if the rock is natural, Kathy?
Well, I was thinking that all of the elements are, natural, and they're not plastics or anything from an environmental standpoint. I was just curious about that.
So yes, glass has three basic elements, but the main one is silica.
Okay.
You know what else is striking to me that I'm just in this discussion now is the smaller rock at the lower left. Here's a small element that's somehow supporting the larger piece and then the orb itself. And it makes me think of just each one of us being an element of the whole structure.
sort of small but vital.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Small but vital. That's the right word. Hank and Micah Jean. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. Wow. I've never even realized that before. I'm just now seeing it.
That's the beauty of these Fridays. I learn something every time I do a Slow Art Friday. So just to kind of wrap things up, this title of this piece is Reflections in Unity by Henry Robinson. He went to Haverford College and got a degree in geology and art, so that kind of makes sense. He was born in Syracuse and grew up outside Washington, D.C. On his website, there was a quote I thought was very appropriate for this piece, and that is, "I am inspired by the concepts of hope, healing, unity, and light of fractured pieces of glass bonded together as a metaphor for a better world." And I think that in a lot of ways describes this piece to a T. And when I picked it, I kind of saw many of the same things that you all saw. I saw that planet, which is potentially Earth, sitting on that solid foundation, but it's not necessarily secure on that solid foundation. Say, as it was just pointed out, if that little rock were to slip out from under the big rock, the planet would go rolling down the hill.
I also want to note something. So you notice probably from the measurement 72 by 72 by 72 that it's referring to the orb. The measurement's a 6-foot orb, and that we worked with the artist to choose how to present it. It's been presented, I want to say, in 2 or 3 different locations with different types of bases. Henry Richardson, the artist, is super thoughtful. And we proposed to him to put the orb on a piece of rock that was quarried from the same rock bed that the Vance Monument was quarried from. So as you know, that probably, right over here is the Vance Monument. And so we wanted to put these two works in dialogue with one another, the Vance Monument and Richardson's piece, Reflections on Unity, so that we could really think about, monuments in public places and unity coming from different places. It's also really interesting that this particular type of rock has a very similar chemical composition to the glass itself. They're both, as I said, a foundational element of silica. And so the artist had a lot of really thoughtful ways that he wanted to display this here in Asheville, especially on this corner and with the materials that were used.
Wow, I really appreciate that backstory. I had I mean, that tie to the quarry and the Vance Monument, which is now shrouded, that it's the same quarry and that there was thought put into that. I never would have known that. Thank you. That just adds even more to the piece.
Where is that quarry?
In Swannanoa. I believe that the stone for Vance Monument was taken from not the exact same quarry, but the same rock bed. There are multiple quarries sort of in this area, but owned by the same company. And so a few of us from the staff got to go out with Henry Richardson and pick out an appropriate boulder. So we were in the quarry with all of the monster machines, which I am very geeky about, you know, the big dump trucks and earth movers and things. And of course, Henry picked out the absolute largest boulder that he possibly could. It was actually, this photograph here was taken on the day that it was delivered and installed. We actually shut down Pack Square and part of Biltmore Avenue in order to have both the boulder and the orb delivered and installed on the same day. It was incredibly exciting.
How is it mounted?
Yeah.
There's actually one small point of contact right here. You know, both my Big Black America and Reflections on Unity are very thoughtfully engineered works of art. And so there's actually a sort of sunken flat piece, Edward, that Henry came and sort of drilled out of the stone in order to set the foundation for the base onto which then the orb was lowered onto and secured.
Wonderful.
Chrissy and Hank, at this time, hearing this backstory and knowing that the Vance Monument is possibly going to be restructured, this kind of feels almost like very exciting that there's so many fabulous possibilities of maybe using the same stone and restructuring it in some really fabulous artistic and beautiful way that can reflect Asheville today.
Yes. Yes.
Barbara, I have heard some really amazing ideas for ways to repurpose, restructure, recontextualize the Vance Monument that make me really excited for Asheville. I think really setting an amazing example for how cities around the country can, you know, think about the monuments that are in their public spaces.
Christy, would you consider having a session where you would discuss those options?
Well, there's actually, Edward, they're putting together a commission, I believe, that's going to have 90 days in which to do research and come up with a working plan for what to do next with the Vance Monument. I believe that they're in the process of taking applications and seating that commission, and then the work would move forward from there. I'm not sure what the next steps would be after they have their 90 days to come up with a plan, but I'm sure that we wouldn't mind being involved in that because it's right outside the museum's front door. And so, you know, when you're up in the museum, you can see it. And I think that it's one of those cornerstone locations of our community that we all as a community have a vested interest in reflecting, you know, who we are.
Yeah. Yes.
That's wonderful. I just want to make another comment. The very first day that I came for docent training, they had just put up my Big Black America. And I remember being so inspired by seeing that artwork in the museum. It made me feel, I can't even explain. It was just such a wonderful artwork to represent the museum. And it just made me so happy and excited to be venturing to take part in the museum. It was just beautiful. It's still beautiful, and just wanted to share that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll ask a question for somebody who is not living in Asheville at this point in time. Are there pictures or other information on the museum's website about the Vance Monument?
We don't have, it's not actually, you know, a museum piece, and so we don't have historic records. I might check, Marie, with the North Carolina room at the Buncombe Public Library. The main branch is over on Haywood. The North Carolina room is an amazing resource. We do have on our website a video that's about 9-10 minutes long of the history of Pack Square, which I think does have some information in it about the Vance Monument. But you know, it's about 100 years of history of the square, but of course the monument sits on the square. So you might head over to our website, Marie, if you click on the Museum from Home page and then click on videos. I think you can find it in the list of videos on the museum's YouTube page.
Okay, those are great starters. Thank you.
I'm also happy to send you a direct link. If you send me an email reminder, I'll find it for you and send it.
Okay, that's my next plan.
Last comments before we break it up for the day.
Just fantastic as usual. Thank you, everybody. I look forward to this every Friday so much. Thank you.
Thank you, because like I said earlier, I learned something every time I host one of these Smart Fridays, and today was no exception. So thank all of you for calling in today, and we will see you in a future Friday.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Hank, as usual. Lovely to see you. Hank is always the docent that leads Slow Art Fridays. That's the risk taker. So not many of the docents so far have chosen sculpture, and we have 3 sculptures today. So thank you, Hank, for broadening our media that we're talking about. Next week, Michelle Weitzman-Dorf will lead a conversation about 3 artworks in our Black Mountain College collection. So let me know if you are interested in joining us. In the meantime, thank you for your wonderful comments and questions and observations. I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you.
You too.
See you next time.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.